Okay, so yeah, I'm Tyler Saucier. I'm from Houston, Texas. And the reason that I started a YouTube channel is because I have musician friends. I'm a musician myself. And I'm always curious about like what makes them tick,
Mm,
especially these particular guys that I have in mind. They're just amazing, mind-blowing musicians that in my eyes are kind of on the cutting edge of psychedelic music.
right.
And so I wanted to meet up with them a couple of years ago to just pick their brain. And so I was trying to get them at like this kind of kava bar. Have you ever heard of kava?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, they have kava bars in Austin, Texas. So I was trying to get these
Oh, really?
musicians friends of mine to meet up and so I could pick their brain basically, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what led me to all of this because I wanted to pick their brain, and my brother is a cinematographer, so I figured I would do an interview with them, and my brother filmed it.
Right.
And so that was a couple of years ago, and I did my first artist interview, and it went super well. And we just had a very like mind expanding conversation. And like if you ask me to talk about psychedelics and music and how those things intertwine, that's like asking me to breathe. Like I'm just very naturally passionate about that, especially, as another musician. So I just kind of started getting into it, but I didn't really pick up until recently, whenever my teaching job got kind of stale. And I realized that like this wasn't going to be it for me forever. I really want to live a more creative lifestyle and independent kind of life. And then I've always been like a big YouTube watcher. So I
Mm.
spend so much time on YouTube already, might as well get on the other end of it. So that's basically it, how I started kind of getting into it. What about you, man?
Um, yeah, I resonate with that 100%. I think I've been on YouTube watching since it started in 2005. And
Mm-hmm.
it was over 5 years before I even joined in and made an account and actually started to teach the algorithm what I liked.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I wonder about that and like how far down this sort of niche rabbit hole I've ended up, where all my recommendations are just so dialed into what I'm interested in. Every now and then I might log on from someone else's computer, but without signing in. And whatever comes up on the feed is just like what you'd find on TV, like everything I'm trying to get away from.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, it's interesting how people find these areas in YouTube that do exist, but are still quite low key. And that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like my intention for this, is to make it like a low key psychedelic podcast. And the low key also being a reference to music, because that's basically
Mm-hmm.
my number one passion in life. And it's what I'm here to do. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, recently, about 9 months ago, I decided I wanted to upload all my music to YouTube. Previously, it had been on Ectoplasm and released for free sort of worldwide. And that was really, I felt good to just be part of this global network of producers. And in some sense, it's a little bit constricted because it's sort of like, um, it's a bit hard to explain. It's not commercial and it's not very popular and it's not really well known.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of like that as well. I kind of like the fact that you have to hunt for it or in some ways have it find you and connect with that. And it's like a little special community, like a global tribe sort of thing. And it just feels really good to be a part of it. Um,
Absolutely.
and so, yeah, I've been in the trance community since my early 20s.
Mm.
And going out doofing, as we call it here in Australia.
What is it?
So
Doof?
doofing.
Doof?
So it's sort of followed on from, it started out as like a bush doof, where we'd go out into the bush for 3 days and have a rave, basically.
Uh,
Yeah, and that just got shortened to doof for short. And then so if you go doofing, you're a doofer. Yeah.
Okay, nice.
I'm a bit of an old school duffer in that way, and that sort of thing just changed my life and opened my eyes. And
Mm,
yeah, it's a huge credit to who I am today, because that I learned so much from it, and met so many amazing, brilliant, wonderful, intelligent, open-minded people. Um, and I guess that planted a few seeds. And yeah, for a few years now, I've been sort of chilled out and getting older and not going out as much, and sort of rebuilt my life from the ground up. I got into some hard areas at some point with medications and had to get off them, and had to sort of start from scratch and relearn how to do everything, because I don't know if you've ever been on any kind of meds, but you get this kind of state dependent learning
mm,
where because I have adult ADHD and it's hard to function, and so my medication would help me function, but everything I learned to do in that state was only in that state. And so when you remove the medication, it's like I don't know how to do anything anymore.
yeah, I get that. I get that. I can only imagine, man.
Yeah, so I mean that was tough, but it was something I had to go through, and I think ever since then I've been trying to learn how to get on my feet and live and manage myself as clean as possible. And so that
Mm,
involved, I even took a break from psychedelics for a number of years in a
mm,
row,
mhm.
just to sort of get the real basics sorted, like, go to bed on time, sleep well, eat well, shower every day, brush your teeth. I don't have to
Mm.
comb my hair, so that's one less thing. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I
so
get that.
so for a few years now, it's been on my mind. I've sort of kept going to conferences, and that's sort of become more of an interest for me, and hearing speakers give a talk for an hour and
Mm,
just covering all kinds of subjects to do with plant medicine and I guess spirituality and stuff like that, basically. And
mm,
I thought, because I'm into YouTube and podcasts, and I used to watch JRE when it was on YouTube. There's a few other good ones, but yeah, it sort of just became a natural thing in my mind. Like, I'd like to do this one day, and today's that day that I'm starting to do it. So yeah, it's really exciting. I'm glad to be here. I think everyone I've spoken to about this has, in the psychedelic community at least, has been really positive and supportive and encouraging, and looking forward to it. So it's nice to finally sort of get something happening.
That's great, man. Yeah, well, I'm right there with you, man, and I'm happy to do what I can to support you as well, man. Because yeah, we're both pretty fresh into
Yeah.
this world right now, and it's not comfortable, for anyone who might be listening that doesn't know what it's like to start speaking in front of a camera, or especially if you're not just like a naturally gregarious and extroverted type of person.
Yes, I relate to that. I mean, I'm basically a complete introvert. And I mean, it's hard, but my confidence over the years, as I said, I've rebuilt this sort of foundation of diet and exercise and sleep
Mm-hmm.
and meditation, and
Mm-hmm.
that has helped immeasurably in my life in all areas. And a big area is obviously confidence, and I think confidence can sort of override that introversion and that sort of tendency to not want to be around people and hang out and talk and socialize. Whereas, I mean, that's how we grow and learn as people. That's how we connect. That's where new things come from. And when we can connect with other minds and share different perspectives, it opens up new possibilities and new areas for us to explore. And I think that's such a wonderful thing, that it's worth more than whatever my own insecurities about social interactions might be. And so it is a bit nervy, but I trust that in time that'll settle down and I'll sort of get comfortable with the process. So there's no reason to sort of let it stop you doing what you want to do.
Yeah, totally. And one of the good things about it is that it's, I feel like you can kind of make a categorization of like socializing and talking to people and stuff, that's one thing. But when you're talking about making like a low-key psychedelic podcast, that's something that's much more curated and like personal to you. So I feel like that will initially like give you that confidence, or just that excitement to where you're not thinking about the nerves, because it's not just some random like party, right? It's a curated space that you get to choose, and you get to amplify what is interesting to you and like what resonates with you. And like that's kind of the big drag of like talking to other people that you're not comfortable with, right? Is that you just can't relate to them or what have you. But with something like this, you get to, it's a little more concentrated, and like you see kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah. What's a good drug analogy that we could use for that? I guess it's like I don't know. There's one there. I used to have one about coffee. And I used to say gratification is like coffee. The instant version sucks. And
I like it.
Maybe that's relatable. I mean, this is not instant. There's a lot of work involved in just setting this up and having it happening. I mean, it's somewhere around 10 p.m. there at night.
Yeah, I think it's 10:44.
Yeah, and it's the middle of the day here, and I had I was tired and slept in today, and just woke up and rushed to the computer. And I'm like, oh, hey man, I just woke up. I can have a shower and we can do this.
Yeah.
Because yesterday we tried to do it and we sort of missed it because I overslept. So yeah, sorry about that.
It worked out. It worked out like this.
Yeah, I think I was still preparing really and going over things this whole time leading up to it. It's been about 2 weeks, a week or two maybe, that's been on my mind, and that we've agreed to get this started. And yeah, my idea for the name of this is Friends in High Places. What do you think of that?
I love it, man. I already love it. I think that's great.
Perfect, right? And that's from the mushrooms. They told me that years ago, and I never knew what to do with it until now. So
really,
thank you, mushrooms. Yeah, much love.
Yeah. I feel like they're always watching or aware of. Yeah. Do you ever get the feeling that mushrooms are like that they know things? Like even when you're not tripping, I feel like they're somehow interlaced into our lives, even when we're not tripping on them.
They become like a spirit family, really. And I do feel that. I do. It reminded me of something, I think, with my last trip. I had a big trip about 2 weeks ago, and took 6 grams of cubensis for the first time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I made it with Syrian Uru extract, about 100 milligrams. So it was basically ayahuasca.
Oh, wow.
And, sort of commemorating 20 years of being a mushroom hunter. And I had a few intentions going in, and it was funny when it started coming on because it was very strong, very quick, and I had closed eye visuals within 15 minutes, which is
oh wow.
I was like, oh
yeah,
okay, we're doing this. And
yeah.
It was funny because I'd been thinking about my intentions leading up to it, and then once I got in there, I'm like, I don't even need to read them out loud. The mushroom knows already. It knows exactly what's in my mind,
right?
More than I do, I think. Yeah. So
yes,
there's a great sort of telepathic thing that can happen, and it can happen with other people too. If you sort of, I think it tends to rely more on if you both dose up at the same time. Or a whole group of people doses up, say like at a party on the dance floor, and everyone's kind of in the same mind state and listening to the same music, then you sort of get this telepathic. It just sort of, every mind becomes one mind, and it sort of links up for a while. Have you ever had any experiences like that?
Um, yes. On like mushrooms in particular. Um, I feel like my last, it wasn't necessarily like telepathy. And it wasn't necessarily on mushrooms either. But when I took acid, it was that recent acid trip report that I did.
Yep.
One of my friends, he seemed to have some kind of telepathy going on, but he was a sober one. But I feel like even with that considered, he was very familiar with psychedelic spaces, so he knew where we were mentally. And I feel like because of that, he really tuned into this frequency that was like, it just seemed so significant and meaningful. Like every little gesture and word that he said, it just seemed to have this profound like purpose and meaning to it. So that's the closest thing that I've gotten to what you're talking about. But I have had like jam sessions on psychedelics where that, to me, that's where the telepathy takes place, when you can like read each other's minds and you're playing from each other and you can anticipate the next move kind of, and it's as if you're speaking something at the same time whenever you are creating music in real time and y'all both kind of like create something that just syncs up like that. So that's another form kind of that telepathy that I guess is just in musical form.
Right. Yeah, music is really kind of a universal language, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I feel like it can be if you already speak some, if you have some of this shared like vocabulary though, because it's like I don't know if I would be able to jam with um microtonal African xylophones or something. I wouldn't feel very universal, but like I do think that it has the potential to be kind of like a universal language, but it's complicated, I guess.
I think, in the sense, on like the emotional level, not the intellectual level. So if you hear
Good
a
point.
piece of music, no matter where it's from, I think there's some kind of vibration that you can connect with, and you don't need to know music theory to be able to understand it. If it's
That's a really good point.
yeah, if it's a sad piece of music, you're probably going to cry. I mean, I cry at, have you seen that movie, The Fountain?
Mm-mm.
You should definitely watch it, man. It's got Hugh Jackman in it. And I recently watched a few YouTube videos of interviews with him, and I might leave a link in the description when this is uploaded. And I never realized he was such a deep soul. He's actually like right into meditation, and he does it every single day with his wife for at least 20 minutes. And he has a really sort of profound, insightful view on life. And that explains a lot of what comes across in The Fountain. And it's the way they made it. The guy, there's all these meditation scenes, and it's quite a deep movie. And there's all these visuals as well. And what they did was used, instead of computer effects, they used actual macro photography for those sort of like galaxies and nebulas and all these. Just watch it. It's hard to describe, but yeah, it's definitely worth a watch.
Okay.
And if you don't cry at the end, then you can have your money back.
Okay, yeah, that sounds very interesting. I've never even heard of it, so
Yeah,
sounds
and
very interesting.
on the point that we were just discussing about, I did watch your latest acid trip report video, and I think you did a really good job of conveying the experience. And it's amazing how deep you went on such a relatively low dose. I'll say that to begin with. That's remarkable.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it reminds me of another point, which I might come back to later. But first of all, the synchronicity thing, I'd like to get into this a bit, because I find it just it's incredible. It's really fascinating. And why does it happen? And it's like everything at some point when during the peak can be just become drenched in synchronicity to the point where it almost seems like it's scripted, like it's been authored by someone, you know.
Totally.
Totally. Do you get that feeling, and what do you think it is? And is that like, it must relate to the telepathy in some way, because nothing is surprising when you're in that state. Everything seems like it's falling into place in perfect alignment. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's a big mystery to me. I'm still kind of dumbfounded by it all. It's just so ineffable, you know, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's just, yeah, I don't know. I really don't know what it is. I think that, you know, I know that our brains have a narrative producing component. I think that as humans, we are always like authoring kind of our own idea of what we think our life is. But what's interesting about all of these synchronicities, and when you're in the peak experience, like what you're talking about, it seems like you become removed from that. Like it's no longer just your standard, like egotistical narrative of yourself. It's like something else much grander and higher. Yeah, like your higher self. Right. So I think that might be something to do with it, that there is such a thing as a higher self, and that whenever the filters are removed enough that you just become aware of what is already going on, you know. But it's still super interesting that in these peak experiences, it just seems to really ramp up. Like, and I don't know what it is, man, but I'm eternally fascinated by it, and I keep investigating it. I've read some stuff by Carl Jung about synchronicities, but I don't think that addresses like the psychedelic side of things. But there's already synchronicities without psychedelics. But yeah, I think someone like us, if you've had that experience, you know what it's like when you're at the peak, and it's like, you know, like that acid trip that I was having, it was like 1,000 synchronicities in every second. And there's this really good Tim Leary quote that he said, and it was like kind of like a psychedelic poem that he was writing, and it was like 1,000 telescopes, 1,000 microscopes, 1,000 blindfolds spinning through awareness at each instant. And I feel like that kind of like describes how that state of mind feels, that you're just seeing everything zoomed in, zoomed out. Yeah, you're in this mystery. It's just, yeah. So I just, that quote came to mind.
That's beautiful, man. And it's perfect too. I mean, I was wanting to have some quotes, good quotes thrown in, and I was going to already ask you if you had any off the top of your head that you could share, and I didn't even have to ask. So yeah,
there you go. It's synchronicity, man.
Yeah, there it is, right there. Yeah. So a good segue. I've got a few notes here. I guess about your friend who was straight with you at that time during that trip. He wasn't on anything, right? There was 3 of you, is that right?
Right.
So you and your friend who had a slightly higher dose, and then your sober friend who was experienced but not on anything at the time.
Right.
To me, I sort of view that position as a space holder, as someone who's holding space and providing a container for your experience. And how valuable do you think that is to have like a trip sitter present? Because most of my experience has been, I mean, all my deep journeys have been alone. And
Mm.
I don't feel like I'm alone because I'm in communication with, like the mushroom spirit or whatever it is. And it's a bit of a odd concept to me to have a trip sitter. It sort of seems like I agree with Terence in his view that there should be just someone in another room that if you ring a bell, they poke their head in and say, everything's fine. You'll be right. And just leave you alone. But recently I did trip and have a sober-ish friend sitting with me, and I was streaming a music mix for 4 hours.
Mm.
And he was there with me in the chat, and we're actually really good friends. We've been hanging out a lot lately on Discord, and it was a very similar thing to what you were describing before. It was kind of like everything he said interconnected and interlinked with my journey, and sort of informed and guided it in ways that I couldn't really have done if I was just sitting there on my own. And do you think you felt the same way? And I know you were mentioning a similar sort of thing before. How valuable is that to have someone there who can, at the right moment, say the right thing or do the right thing and sort of guide you into new areas where you might not have explored if you had been just on your own or just with your friend? And
Yeah, well, I think it could go either way, and I agree with you on what, the Terence McKenna method of just having someone in the other room or having someone that you can call as really just kind of like a lifeline, just worst case scenario type of thing, because things can get super difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's more about that. And another little side note is that sometimes the person who says that right thing or something, they could also be tripping. They don't have to be the sober one for them to say something that is impactful and guides your trip in a different direction, right? But with all that said, in this particular case, my friend who was there, he, his act of kindness and, his holding of that space was the reason I had the biggest breakthrough experience of my life. So I got to think that, it's a pretty good thing to have someone like that, considering that that was my most powerful experience by far. So I don't have a whole lot of data points to kind of like point in the right direction, because that's only one trip and I could just have been a coincidence or that particular circumstance. But yeah, so in my eyes, it made a profound difference, So I think it could go either way. And I think that there is value in tripping alone and just having someone that's there too. Cause I totally agree with you that it doesn't feel like you're alone especially if you're dealing with like plant spirit type of thing. And even being alone on acid or something like that, you could be vibing with yourself. You're with you, like you're not a party of zero. You're a person, so you're kind of hanging out with yourself. So I'm very like, I guess, neutral on it, but I tend to think that having someone like that can and did make a huge, profound difference for my experience.
Mm. Well, yeah, shout out to my bro Seva. He's in the UK, and he's actually already agreed to be guest number 2 on here. So cool. He'll be watching this. How are you, man? We spoke on the phone last night, and I was showing him just how to write music from scratch, basically, which is like, it's a pretty steep curve just in the computer. And yeah, actually, yeah, following my recent journey where he was trip sitting for me, just kind of by accident. We didn't arrange it beforehand. It just kind of happened because we've been hanging out online so much, and he was just there. I actually returned the favor later on because he dosed up 1,000 mics of crying book.
Oh, geez.
And went deep. I actually think he was going to, but he might have only had half that night. But it was still
half of 1,000.
He doesn't do things by halves by everyone else's standards. He does them by halves by his own standards, which are quite remarkable. And I respect that. And he actually put together his own sort of down-tempo chill mix for 2.5 hours and streamed that and jumped on and did the same thing that I did, basically. And so I woke up one day and walked out the front for a vape and checked my phone and saw his icon on YouTube glowing red. I'm like, oh, fuck. Sort of run in and jumped on, and I'm like, word up, man, what's going on?
Nice.
Yeah, and ended up, I returned the favor and did the same thing for him. And I ended up smoking a little bit of weed, and stuff came through me to tell him that was brand new to me, that I'd never thought of before. I didn't know where it came from. Some of it was quotes from Alan Watts and stuff like that, but a lot of it was like, man, I'm learning a lot from this. Yeah, it's really profound. So I think there's something to that, and it's amazing that it can work through a digital medium. It just had this really high-tech quality to it. Just like it's brand new to me. It's such it's a cool concept to be able to think that that's a possible thing that we can do. And like technology. What do you think of technology and how far it's come in the last 10 or 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very like much a sci-fi kind of like futurist, like optimist as far as that goes. But I'm I always acknowledge that technology can be a double-edged sword, right? Like we've seen that with social media, like the way that it's connected people kind of to help usher in like awareness, and could even be like political power for just more common people. But on the other hand, you have like extremists getting together and all that kind of stuff. But in general, I think that it's positive, and that we are going to see it's going to be even crazy. Like it's just gotten so crazy already, and it's just going to continue. Like we think it's advanced now, like just wait, in the next 10 years we can't even like 8-9 years ago we didn't even imagine like Instagram would be a thing. And so just imagine what is like just around the bend that it's not even come to our awareness yet. And so I'm always kind of expecting the unexpected with that. And what you're talking about is really interesting, though, like how the technology and like having like a trip sitter that's somewhere all the way across the world, and being able to stream music and just to integrate all of that is just super interesting. And I'm very like much for that. So
yeah, me too. I think it's something I'm going to really embrace in the future, and especially for us psychedelic people. I mean, it's hard, honestly, to find someone that lives near you that you can talk about these things with, or go through these things with. Even we're sort of a rare breed, really, still, and that's nice and all, but for us to grow as a community and even just to maintain ourselves, we need to connect with each other,
Totally.
And so I think all these lockdowns recently have sort of really pushed the tech to sort of keep up with the demand for people to be able to utilize that in a way that's conducive to moving forward. How did you have lockdowns there? I'm sure you would have. How did you find that whole process? What was it like for you over there?
Well, yeah, it was definitely pretty scary. We had our lockdowns kind of started around March, April. I think that was about when it started happening for other places, but and we had multiple waves. I feel like Australia took care of it pretty well, and I remember feeling like, we're still in this. And Australia, it seems like they're having concerts now. Like what? It just, like people are super stubborn over here, and there's a lot of like just so many conflicting like views. And it's so I'm more thinking about that type of thing when the lockdown happens, just like how for some people it's like um all about they're crushing my freedoms, and this is the oppression, this is like fascism. And then some people are saying it's safety, it's science, and just like all this noise, and you're trying to find a signal in the noise.
Yeah.
And then the experience of lockdown itself was like definitely scary and unknown, especially right when it started. We didn't know how long it was going to be for, or we didn't even really know much about the virus at that time too. So there was just a lot of unknowns, and it was just really frightening. And but personally, it was interesting because I had kind of different, like a fluctuation myself, because I love to spend time alone and at home. So for the first 2 or 3 months of lockdown, I was thriving, man. Like I was hitting a creative stride and like creating music, and like more creative than I had ever been ever, and I could hone my craft. I could spend enough alone time to like restore my psychic energy, and that also fuels like my creativity and stuff. So yeah, that was a thing. But then eventually I just kind of crashed, and like then I was like ready for, I miss playing concerts, performing, and the lack of human contact starts to affect you a little bit. I like being alone, but I feel like I have a minimum of like human contact, so it's just been a cycle like that. So yeah, it started off really well, and then it got kind of worse, and then it went back up again, and now it's kind of just like on a plateau, and it seems like things are kind of opening back up soon.
Yeah, I hope they do. And it's been very similar for me. As a creative person, we can get distracted with the world all too easily and sort of get in our own way. Whereas if you know that nothing's going on for the next 3 months, that's time to get started, get working, get moving, get some things happening. And I started out, it's like kind of before enlightenment, chopping wood, carrying water. After enlightenment, chopping wood, carrying water. I didn't know the difference to begin with. I was just like, yeah, sweet, I'll learn some things. I'll start investing in shares because I'm not going out spending money.
Yeah.
Still like staying in touch with family just over the phone and whatnot. But yeah, the live music scene just disappearing, that had a big effect on me. After a while, I started just not having a breakdown, but just being like, I need this. And I was only going out once a month, but it's kind of like, what do you work for? What do you even bother surviving for? You've got to live at some point, right? Like Terence says, it can't all just be sweat and tumble.
Yes.
So it's a bit of a grind at that point. It sort of becomes like, you sort of realize that, man, community is important, even if it's just in small doses.
Yes, totally.
I like to microdose my community.
Yeah. I like the kind of low-key, like smaller groups, like that Discord server that we're in, the Friends of McKenna. It's just really nice, like low-key. I think it has like 60 people in it now, but for a while it had like 30. And it's just like formed from those live stream events that Dennis McKenna was hosting, and just someone linking the Discord in the chat. And I think that's a great like natural way to find other people in the community. Just anyone who would take the time to like watch a Dennis McKenna stream is probably going to have some interesting things going on, or be interested in mushrooms or intellectually curious and stuff like that. And I also go to this meditation group that happens on the first Saturdays of the month. It's based out of San Francisco, but because of the coronavirus and all that stuff, they started doing it online, and it's hosted by Erik Davis.
All
And
right.
you've heard of him?
Yeah, I've seen him. He came to Australia before.
Oh, really? Okay. So
Yeah.
yeah, he's a great author, and has that whole like Irish American psychedelic bard tradition,
Yeah.
like I think he really does. And he was the last person to interview Terence McKenna, so that's kind of a cool little fun fact. But anyway, he hosts this meditation group, and it's called Psychedelic Sangha, and it's a meditation group geared toward psychedelic, like psychonauts.
Mm.
And I think that's a really cool like niche community, and so it's been cool to be a part of that. And it's like real low key, it's like 20-30 people max. Last time I was there, it was 15 people. So it's just a really cool, like that's a nice little microdose of a community. Like that's the kind of stuff that I want to be doing for sure.
Definitely. That sounds amazing. Yeah, I like Erik. He's a little bit too American, pushy, forward out there for Australians are really laid back and chill. So it can be a bit sort of like just calm down a bit, dude.
Yeah, well, you should check out the meditation. I feel like he has more sides to him, like I can see what you're talking about, but I feel like when you're in a small group and he knows that he's with other like psychonauts and stoners, basically, that he chills out a little bit in that environment. So
yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And those Dennis live streams that happened way back when, I don't know, about 6 months ago, was it?
A few months, something like that.
They were really good. They just came out of nowhere. And yeah, I remember in the chat we had thousands. Like, I think it got up to 6,000 people watching.
Oh yeah. You're talking about I remember what you're talking about. That was the Terence McKenna anniversary of his death, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
back
so
in April.
Right. And funny enough, I have a niece who was born on that April 3rd, the day he passed. And I also know Deneen Fendig, Duncan Trussell's mother, also passed on that same day. So it's a special time of year. I think we should keep it in mind to do something around that time of year, just in sort of remembrance and in honor. And I'm so glad that Dennis took the time to make that happen.
Totally. Have you heard the term the high holidays?
No, but I mean, I get my definition of holidays from Alan Watts, and he just says it's holy day. That's what it's for. It's for holy days. Yeah. That's where it came from. And then they started to crack down on it because people were taking too many of them.
Yeah, right. I feel like there's one for everything now, but especially different communities can have their own holidays. Because if you think about it like that, Ramadan or Hanukkah, it's specific communities that have their holidays, their holy days. So I feel like the psychedelic community has their own version of that. And the high holidays, there's this 4-day streak in April, starting April 19th, which is Bicycle Day.
Yeah.
And then the day after that is 420.
Right.
The day after that, I feel like there's something that happens, but I always like it because the day after that, April 21st, is my birthday. So I just kind of fit it in there. And then April 22nd is Earth Day. So that's a high holidays, those 4 days in a row.
That's nice, but a really good sequence to have, especially like acid first and then weed.
Right.
Priorities.
Yeah.
So when did you start doing LSD, and how many years ago was that? And how many years into the future do you think, or just indefinitely, like and what are your thoughts on integration and like dosage, frequency, that sort of thing?
Okay. Well, to answer your first question, I first took acid probably about 10 years ago. It was I think that trip report was actually the first time that I took real acid. And yeah, what was your second question?
Sorry, I threw a whole bunch in there at once. Just about frequency and integration and how you feel going into the future. Because speaking with my mate Seva, he's dosing up large like once a week recently, and it's the right thing for him to do at this point. But it does come up in our discussions, like how much time do you really need to integrate? And if you dose up really high and then you do it again a week later, how much more do you expect to get out of it at that point that you haven't got from the previous one?
Yeah. Well, I guess it really depends, because some people are like, you couldn't knock them out with a horse tranquilizer. So I feel like somebody like that might need 1,000 mics or something just to get something out of it, right? So I feel like it's dependent on the individual. Personally, I think I'm extremely sensitive to psychedelics, especially acid. Like that 2 hits plus weed was enough to hit like full-blown mystical consciousness. So in frequency, I feel like, especially with those big experiences, it takes me months to really integrate them. And it wasn't until kind of later that I realized that integration was important and actively acted to integrate my experiences. Because when that stuff would happen to me, like during my first big acid trip, it was like I had this whole afterglow and this way that I felt afterward, but I wasn't like doing the work to like actually integrate these things, which later I did. Like now I practice Kundalini meditation, and that is my way of integrating what happened to me all those years ago. But I was not consistent and like active about it before. Or like whenever I have themes of alchemy in my mushroom trips, like I wasn't really like reading into it further. But then eventually later on, like more recently, for both of these things, the Kundalini and the alchemy, it was the last like 2 or 3 years that I really was like, all right, I'm going to integrate all this crazy stuff that happened to me in all of these trips, like leading up to now, so that I can really make this part of my life. Plus, when I take my next journey, it's not like I feel like the mushrooms or the acid are going to be like, what are you doing? Like, we gave you what you needed, and like, why are you back here? And I feel like that I hear people who have really hard, difficult trips, and it seems like that's kind of what it is when you're like asking to take too much from these experiences. So I treat it with a lot of respect and caution. And like, I'm not saying that people that dose really high and frequently are disrespecting that, but in my personal, like what works for me, it's 3 months back to back would be frequent for me. So what I do usually now is like 4 or 5 months apart on average. And I really try to integrate what happens to me. And like, I took the last time I tripped on LSD was on New Year's. And the last time I took mushrooms was in May. And that was the only psychedelic trips I took in 2020. I actually tried MDMA for the first time in like August. So they're very spread, like 4 months spread apart each. And I really try to integrate like what happens to me. And I realized that it takes quite a long time for me to do that, because there's step 1 of like understanding what the hell just happened. And then 2, what do you do about it? And then develop like a routine or like some sort of like ritual around that. It takes time, especially for someone like me. Because like I'm the type of person that if I have a conversation, like me and you might say something to each other, and it won't be until like later that night or maybe the next day when I fully like process it and be like, oh, that's the lesson that I got from this conversation, So it's like that times 10 on psychedelics. So the last question that you asked, like going into the future, I'm definitely not on team hang up the phone. Like I like when Dennis McKenna is asked about this, he always says like, these are my teachers. And so I still go back to them because I feel like there's still more to learn. So that's kind of my mode of operation. I'm still learning from these things, and I feel like because I don't take that huge of doses, I feel like I really still have only scratched the surface. But I feel like, yeah, I still have a lot of stuff to integrate from the past, but I still feel I see myself continuing to take it for basically the rest of my life. And it would be cool if I could pull an Aldous Huxley and, inject some LSD when I'm on my deathbed or something like that.
Yeah, wow, that's an in-depth answer, man. Thank you. I really appreciate the way your mind works, and I definitely resonate with that. I'm very much the same way. Yeah. Great minds, right? I think very much the same for me. I mean, early on, I sort of learned by trial and error that that's the way to go, and sort of in line with what Terence recommends, which was high doses rarely, and that they give you so much if you come to them with an open mind and an open heart. It's beautiful, and it really is life-changing. And for it to be life-changing, you have to change your life. It's not going to do it for you. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be like you had this one amazing night and then suddenly everything's different. It's like we live in time and space, and things have to unfold at their own sort of pace.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's like this little blossom that sort of sits inside you and slowly grows and unfolds and flowers, and then maybe the leaves fall away, and then maybe a new season starts and another flower will begin to blossom. And that when you feel that coming up, it's time to go back. And I do understand that sort of sentiment of having, when you return, when you finally come back, having something to show for yourself. And to me, that's like a deep honor and respect, and the way to approach and the way to sort of pay your respect and pay your dues is to say, look, I listened and I've done everything I can, and I love you. Thank you. Please show me more. Show me what else can I do? How else can I learn and grow as a human being? And I don't think that ever ends. I don't. Maybe for Alan Watts, I listened recently to some lost interview that he did, and that just recently got put up on YouTube from a radio interview. And at the start, he sort of introduces himself and says, like, he's basically a reincarnation of a Zen Buddhist monk. And his view on acid was like, if it all disappeared tomorrow, I wouldn't care because I've integrated it and completely, and that's got nothing more to teach me. And to me, that's a really sort of arrogant attitude. Like, what about everyone else, Alan? Where's your bodhisattva sort of mentality? It's when you're sharing is caring. We're not all there with you. You might see us all that way, and that's good for you. But for the rest of us, a lot of us are just little kids. We're not all old souls, and I think that Dennis did a really huge favor for the rest of us in saying that, it's like, why go back to it? It's like, well, why have a shower if you had one today? Why would you want to have one tomorrow?
Yeah.
It's because life mucks us up and messes with us, and it's difficult, it's a grind a lot of times, and for a lot of people. And we're sort of missing that sacred component in our Western culture, which was there with us during our evolution as a species. It was always some sort of tribal family that we had, and the sacred was part of our life. It was embedded, it was acknowledged, and it was honored, and with reverence and respect. And I feel like that's a deep human need for us to have some sort of connection, some direct experience with the divine in our own lives.
Yeah. It's interesting that the historical side of all this, because we live in the Western world, right, which is descended from European and Greek and Roman and the colonization that followed after that. And there's a history of those people oppressing this sacred type of thing, or at least it being buried so deep underground that we don't hear about it. Like the Dionysian mysteries and stuff seem to be like the one like link back to some sort of undercurrent in Western society. Like, and I think that Gnosticism and stuff like Rosicrucianism and alchemy is also that undercurrent that like survived in like this European like kind of timeline that we find ourselves in, that was the little lifeline that like went back, from alchemy all the way back to like Egyptian alchemy and Chinese alchemy, and like how that stuff is connected to the sacred. So it's just really interesting, how we're like cut off from that, but we're rediscovering it, and how there's also like indigenous cultures that exist today that are still connected to that we can learn from, but we have to like learn to respect that and like learn from it while realizing that we're like our own kind of thing. Like I feel like we're not going to be singing Icaros and like wearing like Shipibo garments and stuff like that. But do you get kind of what I'm getting at?
I do. And I have sung Icaros before. I haven't gone and bought all the clothing.
No, don't get me wrong. Like I'm not bashing that at all. I'm just saying like
we're our own thing, and it's
yes.
Our lineage is different from that. I totally understand, and I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that you can integrate some of that and like hybridize it and like reform it. But like for example, someone, let's say an American that calls himself a literal shaman, I don't know if I can get down with that. So that type of thing is kind of more what I was getting at. But like I'm also super interested in Icaros, and like I'm very fascinated in that whole like the way that music can modulate your experience, and I want to learn how to do that too. So like I just want to be clear that I'm like not putting that down and just trying to add a little nuance to what I was just saying there, because I can see that being misinterpreted.
Hey, look, nuance is on my list of notes, so we've hit another one.
Nice.
And it's on my high up on my list of things to do is to put together a full ayahuasca Icaro ceremony with all the music that I've used in the past, because I've had maybe a dozen times with it. And because I'm on my own, I use the Icaros, the traditional ones, and I do a traditional brew, and just to have a foundation to understand where it's coming from. But in the future, I do see it becoming more my own adaptation to suit my heritage and what's formed my sort of basis as a human over my life, which is basically electronic music and trance music. And
yeah, exactly, man. That what you're saying is exactly like my intention behind what I was just trying to say earlier, because I just realized I probably sounded like I don't know, but I feel like I came off kind of how I didn't want to, but the way you're saying it is exactly like how I think it should be, is what I'm saying.
Yes. Yeah. I understand. And it can be tricky sometimes to find the right words for things, especially for me, and especially in the context of a live discussion. Whereas like, if I'm sitting there writing things, even if it's writing really fast and having a conversation, I can do really well. Whereas if I'm person to person, I'm similar to you, man. We'll have a conversation and then you'll ask a question and then I'll have the answer, but it will be 3 days later.
Yes. That was me just now being like, all right, backspace.
Control Z on that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can edit it out in post, don't worry. It'll just be me sort of reinterpreting all your answers to all the questions.
Yeah, well, yeah, so be it.
Yeah, the PC version for all the wilted pansies out there that can't handle it being remotely even potentially offended. How could you?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love my ayahuasca shaman. He's in California and he runs a great ceremony and he wears white robes and
yeah.
sprays
Well, I'm
agua
just saying,
florida.
yeah, let me be clear. Like, I'm not prescribing my truth to everyone. I'm just saying, like, what works for me. And it seems like what, at least between me and you, we have a like minded perspective on what I was trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I appreciate it a lot. And I think it's been a really helpful discussion for me so far. We've already done an hour and it feels like 15 minutes.
Oh, really, man? Dang.
Yeah. So are you happy to keep going for a while? Because
Sure.
yeah, there's a few more things. We've covered a lot of ground that's been really interesting for me. And I think it's sort of flowed naturally. And
Absolutely.
that's perfect because that's what I was sort of aiming for. Do you have any questions for me?
I kind of want to hear about some of your like formative experiences, because I feel like there's a difference between a real like psychedelic person and someone who has tripped before. And I feel like for some people, when you have these huge experiences, these life altering moments, that puts you on a path where you really commit to it. Because it's like not everyone who takes mushrooms and ayahuasca is going to want to start a podcast like about psychedelics or make videos about it. So, like, what are some of your more formative experiences, or like maybe when you were younger, that really like led you to where you're at?
That's a great question. um, uh, I mean, so just some of the bigger, more life-changing ones that sort of shaped me as a person. Is that generally where you're getting at?
Yes.
Uh, there's a lot. Um, I understand what you mean. Like some people will trip and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, mushrooms." I'm not doing that again. Whereas me, I'm like, "Oh yeah, mushrooms," but there's something to this, and I'm gonna find out what that is. I was very curious as a child when I started reading the books on my mum's shelf, and I was like, "Oh, there's this thing called God. What is that? I want to find that." And at some point, I kept going with mushrooms. It was introduced to me when I was 15 years old, and I was taught how to hunt. And from that point, I started to develop a relationship with them, whereas a lot of my other friends at the time were just whatever. They'd rather drink and smoke weed or take pills or, goof off. Whereas to me, I was like, there's a connection with this God thing here. And I don't know what it is, but I want to find out. I want to explore. And pretty within a few years, I came to know the voice of the mushroom, which spoke to me in a very literal sense and was always loving and had the greatest sense of humor and was joking around with me and making me laugh, making me cry, and like moving me in my heart and opening my heart and teaching me about love. And it was all very telepathic and deep and sort of you get this information that sort of floats above the normal intellectual level that you're used to thinking. Your thinking mind sort of operates on this one frequency, but this would give you information on a higher level. And I mean, it taught me meditation. It taught me during deep visions to be still. And if you want to go deeper, you need to still your mind. You can't go past this point without being still. And so I would go into places where language doesn't really map onto anything anymore. And I had two main experiences of the silent darkness. And the way I actually found Terence McKenna was what turned out to be the way he recommends you start going about psychedelics if you are new to it, which is that I went to the library and I typed in hallucinogens in the search function and found True Hallucinations on the shelf, and I borrowed it and I read the first page and I was like, holy fuck.
God, yeah.
This is for me. This guy is saying he's putting language to things that I've experienced because I'd already been shrooming for a good 5 years.
Right.
I'm not crazy. It's actually real. It's fucking real. It's not something I'm imagining. It's not in my head. It's legit. And this guy's been there and he's talking about it in a way that makes absolute perfect sense. And some of it's a bit wild, but a lot of it is really good, solid, practical information and guidance. And I just find it funny that he recommended in his talks when I found them online to, if you're new to the whole thing, to go to the library. Because that's what I did.
That's awesome.
And I had one experience where I was at a friend's place and he had mushrooms and he gave me just a bunch, and I filled up a sandwich and ate them like a gangster, just like gagged it down, and no one else was on them that night except for me. And that's the night that I had that stillness sort of lesson to go deeper. And then at the end of the night, when everyone left, I stayed the night and went and slept in his brother's room. But what happened is I walked in, there were no lights on, I sat on the bed and I just sat there and I was in this space. My eyes were closed or open, it didn't matter, but I was in this like 6-dimensional cube and I was surrounded by these moving, intricate walls of something. And I was just sitting there feeling it. It was a very sort of feeling based thing, but I could also see it, and there was something below me, above me, on my sides, in front of me, behind me, and it was sort of breathing. And that's about as much as I can say about that. But I was like, wow, that's something I've never done before, and it's like I felt safe there. As alien and as trippy and as unusual as it was, I didn't feel afraid at all. I just felt like this is new. Let me experience it. And I sat there for like at least 2 hours and it stayed the same. It wasn't your usual sort of visuals coming at you from the front. It was something else. And the second time in Silent Darkness, I actually started reading Timothy Leary and all that. They did a psychedelic version of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, that's I know that because that was like the manual for a lot of people in the 60s. And one of my favorite songs is Tomorrow Never Knows by the Beatles, which is like basically them reading off of that book.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, check it out with that in mind.
Yeah, send me a link later.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I haven't read it though, but I'm like aware of it and I know what it's all about.
Yeah, it's worth a read, and it is kind of like a guide to tripping, but it's based on all this mythology, this Tibetan sort of mythology of dying and death, and how to go about it in a way that's going to be beneficial and not just, some people have the idea that if you have a certain level of awareness, which is not really refined, that when you die, you'll pretty much just be reborn automatically. Whereas I don't want that to happen. I want to have a choice. I don't want to have to come back, but I want to have a choice of if I want to or not.
Yeah.
So that's another story, my intention to not have to come back. Because once I found out about the concept of reincarnation, I'm like, well, this doesn't fit with what I've been taught, but if it's real, I don't want to have to do it.
Yeah. Right. It's like, damn, we've already been through so much. Like, what do I really have to go through? Like scratching my knee and falling in that ditch when I was 11, doing all of that again.
Yeah, like imagine if it was the same life over and over again. How would you know?
Yeah, right.
Keep going until you get it right, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I started reading that, and I had a good supply of mushrooms at the time, and I was living with family, but in this really weird dark room, and the walls were all painted black and red, and it was not the best environment. But and I was also in a very difficult, abusive relationship at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically my setting. Apart from that, I knew I needed to trip and to go deep, and so I started reading this manual, and then got excited about it, and just took a really, really, really big dose, and then kept reading. But it kicked in before I could finish reading it, and that was at night time, around the time I would have gone to bed. So I was all prepared and just shut out the lights, had to stop reading, and it was coming on really hard. So I just laid down and thought, I'll see if I can sleep. I know I won't be able to, but I'll just put myself into that sleep mode, because that's what I do at this time of night. And it sort of entered this static, not much is happening, sort of resting, but not really resting because there's something happening state. And then it opened up into like what I came to refer to as the vortex. And it was this very big spinning. It was kind of in front of me, but I was going through it. It got pulled into this vortex, and it was just, I had audio hallucinations for the first time ever. Like I was hearing voices that sounded like they were coming from outside of me, but they weren't. And I was just sort of tearing through all this dark material from my life, from my relationship at the time, from things in general that were difficult for me. And I struggled with it the whole time. I was like, this is fucked. And it's a lot for me to take on right now. It's really hard to handle. And come to find out later on, when I finished reading the manual, that it says, don't do that, don't struggle. Would have been really useful information, whether or not I could have applied it at the time or not.
Yeah.
And so I went through the vortex. It was rough, but it was mushrooms, and so it wasn't for no reason. And then after that, I came out the other side. It was blank for a while, and then I sort of became aware of myself as like this core being of color and light in space, in very deep space. And I was outside of it to begin with, looking at it, and then I sort of merged into it. And at that point, I think I died. I think I was dead. I was just everything, and I was in the center, and I was resting as if I was literally passed away. And so I loved it. I stayed there for a while, and then after some time, it felt like hundreds of years, I stepped back out and took the position of looking back at what that was. And then a few more times I swapped from being it to looking at it, to being in it to looking at it, and then being in it some more. And then once I felt like, okay, I think I'm good now, I sort of left and came back. And it was a very smooth, gradual pulling back to this reality. And then the sun was coming up the next day, and I was just tears just streaming. I've never cried so much, I don't think. One of the highest levels of mushroom tears that I've ever had. And like, I love that sort of thing. And it's because I was so just peaceful and so appreciative and grateful and humbled to have that experience, because it felt like I had a few thousand years of rest, and that would allow me to keep going in this life. I mean, I used to be suicidal and struggle with depression and anxiety and stuff like that. And now and then I've had these mushroom journeys where I've gone really deep, and they've given me the energy to continue for at least another 10 years. And to me, that's like the greatest gift, and something, of course, that I've had to work at integrating for a long time. And I don't talk about it much with people. You know, it's sort of like unless you understand what tripping is like and how these things work from experience yourself, it just sort of sounds like, oh, you just imagined it. You're an idiot.
Mm-hmm. Wow, dude, that is an incredible story, though. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks for listening. It was an
Yeah, well,
incredible experience. It really was, and it's something I'll never forget. And I guess it did a lot to remove the fear of death, if I did even have any at that point. I think I've mostly grown up with the opposite of like, death would be kind of cool right now.
dang,
Compared to
man.
living. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Not
I
to bring the
understand.
vibes down at all, but yeah, I'm doing so
Yeah,
much better now. Hey, I'm doing really
yeah.
well. And like,
Hey, you're
yeah,
being honest.
yeah, I think honesty is wonderful, man. Like, it's important. And I don't really have time for anything else, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, honest people don't have to remember anything.
That's funny.
Mm. I'm sure there's a better way to say that, but that gets the point across, right?
Yeah, no, I get where you're getting at.
You don't have to keep track of it all.
Right,
Mm.
right. Wow, man. Yeah, that part about having thousands of years of rest, that is incredible. Like there's probably something to that, like because of the strangeness and profundity of like some of the things that I've encountered in my own psychedelic experiences, like I don't rule out anything when I hear a story like yours, what you could have experienced could be beyond current explanation. Like I really truly believe that we are tapping into something that is not understood in a rational and scientific way yet, and
Mm.
we have no idea what lies beyond the veil. Or I mean, we jump into it in these psychedelic experiences, but yeah, I feel like the scientific, like rational map of the world that is like telling us what are objective facts of reality, they haven't touched this stuff. And there's people like you that are going in there and like exploring the like edges of human consciousness and life and death and deep stuff, and it's like just all such a mystery right now. And maybe in a few hundred years someone will look back at this and be like, oh yes, he's having the reincarnation experience, of course. Like we know now that his spirit is in body 25A56-2 or whatever.
Yeah, man. Well, it was the Tibetan Book of the Dead after all, and I did feel reborn the next day, you know. And if I had have, I was happy to come back. Put it that way. I was happy to have another chance at this life and to make something of it.
Sure.
So, what are your meditation practices currently, and how do you feel about the whole Kundalini thing? Because I find that really interesting. And just a quick thing before I forget: have you seen the Big Lez Show? It's an Australian cartoon on YouTube.
No, I haven't.
It's really funny. You should check it out. It's made by a
Okay.
guy that was in high school using a school computer and like MS Paint, and just recording all the and doing the script and making it all himself. And it seems like a massive amount of work, but it turned out really crude but really funny. It's just like a bit of a headphone warning, because a lot of the time the audio has screaming, which just clips to blazes. And
yeah,
it's got psychedelics in it as well, and it's really sort of well done. It's very amusing. But that guy who made it, I think his name is Jarrad. He has quite a few videos, just sort of blog style, talking about his experiences on YouTube. And he actually describes a Kundalini experience that he had. So that would be worth you checking out to see how it relates and matches up to your own experience.
Totally. Oh yeah. I'm always interested to hear other people's stories about that. Yeah. So like, the thing with my experience is that I had not heard anything about that prior. This totally just happened to me. And so that is what, to me, was kind of the ultimate verification that there is at least something to this. So like I hear people, kind of like new age type people, which like I'm friends with people like that, but like some people speak with like complete authority on like, oh, your chakra this or your chakra that, your Kundalini this. And to me, like they sound silly sometimes, but I'm sure there's some truth to that. But so it's like this really weird kind of thing for me where it's like I know that it's real because I've experienced it firsthand and it's happened to other people, and I've continued to have experiences like that. And I've noticed that there's a link between weed and these Kundalini experiences. Seems like that's when they come out.
Really?
Yeah. So I do my Kundalini meditation, right, which is this guided meditation. It's by this lady named Kelly Howell. I think she's just some American, and she does like a guided meditation, and there's music, and I think she might even be the one singing kind of in the background. It's like this ambient atmospheric music. It's a 30-minute meditation, and basically it starts off with this thing called breath of fire, which is where you rapidly inhale and exhale using your diaphragm. It's kind of like that thing, the billows, like where you clap the sides like together for like the fire. It's kind of like, right. It's kind of like that, but for your own energy center. So the thing I noticed about when I started to feel this Kundalini energy is that it started in the stomach center, and it felt like, like when you're hungry, you're motivated to go get up and get food. And probably for our ancestors, it motivated them to go out and hunt or pick berries or whatever it was. Yeah. So there's this kind of primal connection for our will to survive and our hunger. And you feel that psychic energy in that location, right? Like when you're hungry, you feel it right here. And there's something like a brain gut connection that's like, all right, I'm going to go get some food. It's like a super primal survival thing, right? So I feel like that energy, that primal will to survive, was rising up and being refined in these higher energy centers, like the heart center, where that energy eventually rose up. And now this heart center, it's like my will to survive and eat was also my will to love and like and be with people or something. And then that rose up to the throat chakra area. And then my hunger to survive became my will to create and express myself. And there was just like all the boundaries dissolved between these like primal forces, which you could describe as the lower chakras, like the root chakra. The three are the more primal chakras, which if you ask somebody, like most people supposedly are operating within the first three psychic energy centers represented by the first three chakras, which is just like super primal. Like I would consider the lowest chakra, like any kind of organism would have that. And then the second chakra is like the mammalian circuit. So like our animal warmth and our love and our nurturing of our young. And it's like in that second circuit. And then the third one is the individual willpower, the individual in society. And then, so most people are operating on that individual kind of like your ego. Like some cultures even they consider their souls or their personalities to be right here. And, other cultures have different areas, but I think that in the Western world, we are behind our eyelids, kind of. That's where we imagine our consciousness. So anyway, with all of that said, I had that experience and it was verified. And I didn't really hear anything about it until I saw an Alex Gray painting that depicted the chakras. It was like somebody painting, like it was a painting of a painter painting, and it showed their chakras, and like their like third eye was like beaming out onto the canvas, and like I was like, that's it, that's what happened to me. And it was like a real verification. And then I scoured the internet for like meditations, because I'm a musician, I really like sound meditations, and they help me get in the zone a little better than just like pure you know sitting in silence, which I do that from time to time, but I really do prefer sound meditation. So I finally came upon this meditation that I mentioned earlier, which is the Kelly Howell Kundalini meditation. And it starts off with the breath of fire. So this is all a super roundabout way because I started getting into the different centers, but starting from the third center, the willpower, there seems to be something to that. To in this meditation that I do, it starts off with this breath of fire exercise, which is kind of stoking the fire of that third energy center, which can kind of like clear the way for it to pass and go to the higher centers. And so that's how the meditation starts. And then following that, it the guided meditation systematically relaxes you from the top of your head to the muscles around your eyes to the muscles in your jaw, and you systematically relax yourself from top to bottom to where you can be still, right? And you talked about this earlier, how that stillness is what allows these kind of visionary things to take place. So it's like preparing the vessel for this energy to arise, right? And so it relaxes you, and then it works from the top chakras down. So you can think of the Kundalini as a alternating current, or like a positive and a negative. So it's like the masculine energy is the one going upward, and then the feminine energy is the one coming in. It's like the universe outside of you nurturing you, coming in. That's a feminine energy coming down. And so some people start from the bottom going up, but I think the Kundalini, there's an interesting connection around like this goddess energy, feminine energy. And I feel like maybe this is totally speculation now, but I feel like maybe once you open the energy first, then you can start to access it through the feminine route and like from top bottom. But I feel like maybe when you initially have your Kundalini, maybe it needs, if you're like a masculine oriented or male, maybe it needs to start going from that direction. I don't know. That's super speculative, but it's just something that I just popped into my head. But anyway, yeah, you work your way down with the energy centers, and then there's just kind of like affirmations behind each energy center as you're going down through this guided meditation. So like once it gets to the throat chakra, it's like saying like very like affirming things like you're going to be like have your intentions are going to be fully focused, and like I can't think of it right now, but basically like you're going to be speaking your truth, you're going to be like aligned with your deepest intentions. That's what it was. And so that's kind of the stuff behind the throat chakra. And then the heart chakra is all about love and compassion and so on and so on, right? So I do these meditations pretty often, and I like to get high before I do them. And because it, for one, helps me relax, and two, it helps me because it's kind of like an active imagination thing where when you're thinking about these chakras, you're trying to imagine them. So it's almost like you kind of deliberately try to make it up in your head, but under the right circumstances, and every once in a while, it doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's like, and if you've smoked weed and you have this visionary like imagination going, then it becomes a flow state, and you're no longer like trying to imagine the chakras and stuff. You're seeing, it's like becomes a visionary experience. And then that's kind of like what happens to me sometimes. And that's what keeps me coming back to it, because I'll get high and I'll be like imagining these chakras, and then it'll turn into this whole visionary experience. And it'll be like this whole flow state where like this profound stuff happens to me. I'll have these whole visions, and like I'll feel the serpentine energy rising up my spine. I'll envision the chakras. I've seen the alchemist stone from my mushroom trip, like the one that I saw in my original mushroom trip. In the Kundalini meditation recently, I saw that alchemist stone again, and I saw how it had been refined, and like basically like the detail was even more refined, and like it was like the difference of like a 10-year-old artist drawing versus like a master, someone that's later in life kind of thing. And so just stuff like that happens to me when I do these Kundalini meditations and combine it with cannabis. And so I'm inclined to think that there's something really going on here. But it's really hard to like talk to anybody about that. So I just kind of keep that to myself mostly. And I haven't met a lot of people who have like this kind of thing with Kundalini going on. So yeah, that's kind of my meditation thing.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds incredible, man. Thank you for sharing that.
Totally.
I'm definitely going to have to look into this, and thank you for recommending that specific audio that you use, because it can be such a good sort of framework to even just to get started, and to be like, all right, when this is playing, this is when we do this. This is when this happens.
Right.
Just a quick question. Does that entire experience happen within the context of 30 minutes, or does it sort of bleed over after it finishes? And how do you sort of close it down afterwards to go about normal life without being wide open and sort of subjected to excessive input sort of thing?
Yeah, good question. Well, it mostly does happen within that 30-minute frame. And usually, like, these visionary type experiences that I'm talking about might happen within 5 to 10 minutes of the entire 30 minutes that I'm talking about. So even by the end of the meditation, it seems to like calm down on its own, and it can like have me opened up for the rest of the day. But I often do it really late at night too. So usually by then I'm winding down and like things are fine. So yeah, it's not too hardcore, because I feel like, yeah, if I was tripping, maybe it would be a different story. But for whatever reason, it's just kind of, they're like flashes more than anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I smoke weed, I trip. I really do trip. I think doing a lot of acid changed weed for me, and it happened to a lot of people, and I had to stop smoking weed for a while.
Me too.
But there's this whole debate about whether it's hydroponic versus natural, and is it really better if it's like 1,000 times stronger than it used to be? And I think it has a lot to do with your own mind when you come into it, what your experience is going to be like. If you're depressed and anxious, you're just going to be depressed and anxious times 1,000 when you smoke weed. So
yeah, I think people should treat it more like a psychedelic trip, right? Like,
right.
If you know you're going to be getting really high or getting somewhat high, you should consider set and setting. And I feel like we don't have like a protocol for that type of thing.
Very much so. And I think when I recently smoked weed, when I was holding space for my friend Seva, that's one of the insights that I had, was that it's less about the substance and it's more about the container that holds it, which shapes your experience. And to me, I'm still processing that, because the implications are really deep. And it's almost like the set and setting is more important than the substance. And like if you've ever done an ayahuasca ceremony but replaced the ayahuasca with weed, I've done this by accident, and I can tell you that weed is not inferior. It's not mild. It's not this pansy little forget about it sort of do it with your friends on the couch in the evenings. You can do it that way, but if you want to go deep, man, it goes beyond deep in the context of a container that will take you there. And I did that by complete accident. So I think there's so much new ground to cover in terms of sort of that kind of blending of modalities where we haven't been there yet as a species. And to me, that's really, really exciting and really sort of encouraging. And yeah, I think I'll definitely share more about that as I come to learn more of it. So yeah, we'll probably aim for around 2 hours, I think, just so we can call it a day and get on with things. I know it's late for you, so you probably want to get to bed sometime soon.
Yeah, I'm good right now, man.
It's been wonderful, though. It's been everything I could have hoped for so far, and just thank you again. Like, yeah, I think we get along really well, and it's been perfect for us to sort of start off this way and have this conversation because we're both sort of at the beginnings of something, and there's that sort of fresh new enthusiasm for things to come, which I think is really going to resonate with a lot of people, especially young people who might not know much about the tradition and the history of these things, and just the legitimacy of it, which is a new thing for us. We've had to deal with a lot of sort of being underground for such a long time.
Yes. Because a lot of these experiences that I had of like acid and mushrooms was like 2011 and 2013. And we've really seen things kind of come around the corner since then, like where it was super taboo still and like just associated all negatively with the 60s and stuff like that. But I feel like in the last 10 years and stuff, we've really seen it kind of come to a more mainstream acceptance. So not that we needed that to be validated anyway, but I feel like because of that, more people are probably going to hear it. So then we're going to be there to like have this discourse around it whenever it is brought more to light.
Yeah. And I mean, that's pretty much half of it is, I mean, you have the experience and then you have the integration afterwards. And, I think just talking about it and thinking about it and going over it is the way you do that. And,
totally.
Implementing changes in your life based on the insights that you received during deep experiences. Have you ever messed around with microdosing at all? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have. I've tried both microdosing mushrooms and acid. And my takeaway is that I don't really like microdosing mushrooms because it makes me just feel like I'm hella stoned. It makes me feel like, especially if I'm trying to like go to work and like use that to like have a better day at work. I feel like every time I would microdose mushrooms, I go into work and I look at myself in the mirror and my pupils are huge and I feel like I'm stoned as fuck. And I'm just like, okay, we're in this. And then one time I cut a little piece of a tab of acid, like a little corner off, and it turned out that was like a fat corner of that tab. And then I ended up having full blown acid trip because I thought I was microdosing like before work. Luckily, and it ended up being okay, but like it was kind of freaky at that time. But I really do like microdosing acid because I feel like while mushrooms are more stoning, I feel like acid does have that kind of like stimulating effect. Yeah. And another thing about acid is you can do volumetric dosing. Yeah. So my method to be more accurate is to dissolve it in like, let's say 500 milligrams of water so that you can pour out 50 milligrams each time. And that it's dissolved evenly. So you're getting the same amount every time. So because of those two things, the stimulation and the accurate dosing, I really prefer to microdose acid. I haven't done it in a while, but I do it on and off.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I haven't properly tried it with mushrooms because I wasn't titrating the dose enough to, like, my view is that if you can't feel it, then it's pointless. So I like to at least feel it a little bit. And every time I did mushrooms, I couldn't feel it at all. And so, but I understand the sort of a floaty, bodily kind of bouncy feeling that comes with mushrooms, which is,
Yeah.
it's good fun. But if you want to work, it's just like, it's like, why?
Yeah. At that point, it's like, yeah, why can't I just chill right now? Why do I have to be at work right now?
Yeah. But for acid, I started out, like I looked it up beforehand how to do it. And I just put like a little bottle with 10 mil of vodka and drop 100 mic tab into it. And so
Nice.
1 mil is 10 mics. And I
Nice.
started on like 20 mics and I could feel it. And I had a really good day. And I came in and recorded my first 500 subs channel update video.
Nice.
Which, by the way, I was going to do another one for 1K subs, but it just blew past.
Nice.
It happened way too quick. I'm like, yeah, it'll happen in like 2 months. Isn't that cool? And then 5 weeks later, I jump online and it's like, what the fuck?
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, okay. I might do one for 2K then and just roll them both into one. So thanks everyone for 2K subs.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen my last update video, go check it out. It's pretty boring. It's just me, but that was the first day I tried microdosing acid. So it sort of proves the concept that you can be functional at least.
Yes.
And whether or not it helped or hindered me in that process is to be determined. But for the day leading up to that and the day following that, it was really good. So.
What you said just reminded me that I should have added when you asked me about microdosing. As far as what I noticed for the benefits, I was writing a lot of music and recording music at the time, and I noticed that when I microdose, it's not that it made me more creative necessarily. It's not like it brought out something that wouldn't have come out of me, that something in my soul, but I noticed that it helped me get outside of the box more. You know what I mean? Like you were more flexible on your old habits and stuff like that, those like ruts that you kind of get into. I feel like I was almost always going to be outside of that. Like I felt that melt away whenever I would microdose, that I could like just get outside of that like habitual form of creating that, we always get into.
Yeah, it's just a modification of consciousness. And I think it's really hard to be aware of where you are without stepping outside of that and looking back on it. And also, like you said, just opening up, sort of removing filters that are in place just, as a matter of survival and day-to-day living.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
They block out so much information. It's like science has a lot of catching up to do because they're missing all of it. Yeah,
that's a good point.
The new research that's happening is definitely going to change the way we live our lives, and it already has. I mean, even without the research, so much of our culture is informed by psychedelic experiences that and we don't even really notice or realize it. It's kind of like when a kid comes into this world and has a smartphone and the internet at high speed, and that's just the way they start living their life. They don't think anything of it. They just pick it up and run with it.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing about, I think, the generation that we grew up in, is that we saw the technology curve go from, pre-internet and all that to smartphones. And yeah, like you said, now every kid has had an iPhone or iPad in their hands since they can remember,
Yeah, so it's like, what's going to be the new thing for them?
Right.
What's going to blow their minds and shake up their world to the point they have to adjust or just become a Luddite, basically. Yeah. So we might close up just speaking a little bit more about your music. I love music and I love to hear about it. And if you could just share some of how you got into it and what you're currently doing and what you'd like to do in the future. And then maybe we'll close with something of yours. That's an option for you. I love to have music at the end of a podcast, and people have been giving really good feedback about that, just instead of being blasted with advertising, to just like, it's almost like a little integration post, what can sometimes be a really deep conversation that you might want to listen to like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, man. Well, I play in 2 bands currently, and one of them is called Sunrise and Ammunition, and the other one's called Granite Hands. The band that I mentioned first, Sunrise, we've been together for like half of my life. We started when we were 14. And so we've been playing together since, the 8th grade. And we put out an album when we were 18, and we've been making music for a really long time. And we're putting out new music still. And some of that stuff just came out. So that's what I'm going to send you. We just put out a new song called Luca.
Cool.
And so, yeah, it's kind of like progressive rock, like experimental. I would call it like psychedelic space rock is probably, if I would narrow it down to anything, that's what I would call it. So to me, that's open enough to where, because progressive as a label is very open to whatever you want to make it.
Yeah.
So I feel like, we're like trippy space prog or something like that. That's probably what I would call it. And then I play in another band called Granite Hands. That's like a mostly instrumental kind of like, I wouldn't call it jazz fusion, but it's almost like a jazzy instrumental rock type of thing. It's like very like atmospheric too, and like very like inspired by like landscapes and nature and like epic scenes and stuff like that. So but I'm just a live member for that. I play guitar in it, but it's all the music is written by my friend Sarush, and he's just like a really brilliant musician and stuff. So we probably will be writing music together like going forward, but up until now it's been all him, and I'm just kind of like the henchman that plays it live. So yeah, man. And I've just had that acid trip where I like basically confirmed to myself that I was here to make music and to create, and that I simply have no choice. Like that's just what I'm here to do. And I'm sure you can relate to something like that. So I don't have any plans to stop. And, like I'm a big fan of like the Beatles and Paul McCartney, especially their psychedelic era. And because I've had some visionary experiences like related to them. Right. And like Paul McCartney, he is 78 now, and he just put out a new album that's actually really good. And he's like still got his knack for songwriting. And like that to me is like the type of thing I want to see myself doing, making albums until I'm like in a diaper, and probably even beyond. I'm going to be singing songs about having to change my diapers and stuff.
That's classic.
Yeah.
Wow. What an inspiration to be still doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I totally feel the same way. Like I've known for a long time now that writing music is my purpose in life. It's just what I'm here to do. And it's a wonderful thing to have that and to know, but it's another thing altogether to actually be able to implement it and find a way to make it work.
It's tough.
Yeah. And like there's also, do you find that there's like this progression you have to go through, like a learning curve as an artist to overcome the fear of just performing, especially stuff you've written yourself? Is that a journey that you feel like you've been through, and do you have any advice for anyone else that's going through the same thing?
I would say that it's normal and that it's good that you feel nervous, because for one, that means you care, like if you weren't nervous, that probably means you might not care that much.
True.
And B, or maybe this would be C, because I already said 2 things. The other thing would be see how you feel once you get on stage, because for a lot of people that fear never goes away. And you feel nervous before you perform. Maybe you do get a little bit more relaxed and confident, but you still get that kind of like anxiety before going on stage or something. But for what a lot of people find is that once they actually go on stage and just do it, then the fear goes away and it becomes an enjoyable, fun thing.
Yeah, it sounds familiar. I think I've heard a lot of big name performers say that even like decades later they'll get that sort of pre-flight anxiety.
Exactly.
And they might throw up or something, you know, like the Eminem in the bathroom before going on to his big rap battle sort of thing. But once you're up there, you just feel like you're at home. So
right.
Yeah. I think for me, my music and playing live, I just wasn't ready for it when I started. I'd only been writing music for 1 year. So I knew that I was shit. But I fucking wrote the music. I wasn't just DJing someone else's music. And so it meant the world to me. And it kept trying to snowball. I kept getting offers to play sets at future events, and I kept just rejecting them because I wasn't ready. I was afraid and insecure, and I didn't feel like, I mean, when I was actually playing the set, it was totally fine. But it was more beforehand and afterwards that I was like heavily sort of judging myself about it. So that's been a big, long process for me, and something that I'm still working on and working towards getting back to. And yeah, I'm currently in a good position. I'm healthy. I feel strong and calm and relaxed a lot of the time. I work 3 days and then I have 4 days off. So
nice.
It's, if you can manage to become functional during your time off, which sounds stupid, but you can just watch YouTube for 4 days and not notice it. So it does feel good to finally sort of, you know, I was downloading for so long, to finally be balancing that out with uploads feels like the right thing to do for me. And I'd encourage anyone that's sort of watching and having similar feelings to what we've been discussing to just think about it. It's not rocket science. Anyone can do it. I'm using just cobbled together stuff. I mean, this microphone I got for free. I didn't even order it. It just rocked up with some other piece of hardware that I got, and just kept it on a shelf for a few years. And people do it with far less. They do it with just earbuds that came with their phone, and you know, I think the higher quality the better, but you don't have to start out super polished and with a Jamie in the background running the show. You can just keep it simple, and I think I almost prefer it that way, to be as simple and direct as possible.
Totally.
Cool.
Yeah. So, and it seems like it's like a big problem. It can be intimidating for people wanting to start because it's such a big like undertaking. But the way that it's worked for me, and I'm sure for you, is like you just take it one little piece at a time. Like, oh, I need to upload a video. What do I need to do to make it like fit the YouTube screen, or to convert this to Instagram? Oh, let me look up a tutorial to figure out this one thing. And then over a very long time, you stack up your skill set and your knowledge. And then eventually you're making YouTube videos that like look good and they're legit and everything. So it's just like, it can be overwhelming to see this huge, vast, like multitude of problems and stuff and things that you have to figure out. But like, once you start taking it one little, or like one piece of gear at a time, you know, like all of that stuff, it eventually does add up.
Definitely. 100%, man. And it's so easy to be overwhelmed when you're looking at the sort of big picture of what you want to be doing. And it can be really difficult to break that down into like, well, what can I actually do? Because I don't know how to do any of it. And yeah, like you said, just pick one tiny thing and learn that. And then as you keep doing that, it builds the picture out. It's like putting a jigsaw puzzle together. You only need to start with one piece, and then you don't put all the rest on at once. You put the next piece in. You just find whatever fits next and move on to that. And then the more pieces you have connected, the easier it is to see the picture as it begins to form and become its own thing. So
beautifully said, man.
Cool. I think we might we might close up unless you've got any final thoughts. I do think, first of all, again, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and being so patient with me getting set up, and even just being willing to come on to a very first episode of something. I think, you're a pioneer. So yeah.
Yeah, dude. Hey, it's an honor for me, man. I'm really honored to be part of the first episode, man. So it means a lot, and I'm like more than happy to do it, man.
Yeah, man. We should do it again sometime. And
Definitely.
yeah, with a bit of blessing from the gods, this will have all recorded and turned out well. And I've been having this thing in the back of my mind this whole time, like, what if it hasn't recorded properly?
Yeah.
I've tested it all before and it seemed to work fine. So
yeah, well, keep your fingers crossed.
It's gonna be good. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, we'll close it up. And
Alrighty, man.
yeah, thanks again so much, and look forward to doing this again.
Yeah, man. Me too. Alrighty.